So you want to start flipping properties, but you're not sure how to fund them. What's going on YouTube? It's Sam Norris here with another property video, and today I'm going to be taking you through the secrets of raising funds for your property flips. Over the last 14 years, I've helped hundreds of investors raise millions of pounds of funding for their flips. And so if you stick around, I'm going to take you through 4 key things that you need to know about raising funds for your flip projects. Property is about patience. YouTube, thanks ever so much for sticking around. Now, before we get started on this video all about funding your flip project, make sure if you haven't already to subscribe to the channel and hit the little notification bell, which will tell you when new videos drop. And lastly, but not leastly, do hit the little thumbs up button because it tells YouTube that you like my video, and hopefully it will send it to many, many more that will hopefully benefit from the kind of videos that I'm putting out at the moment. So today is all about flipping properties and specifically about funding those flipping properties. It sounded a bit rude when I said that, those flipping properties, but that's what we're doing today. And specifically, we're talking about 4 key areas that you need to think about. And those 4 key areas are, firstly, the type of funding that you need to think about. So investors, cash, bridging, we're going to cover them all. Secondly, we're going to be talking about what type of funding works for you and how you figure out which one is going to be the best solution. Maybe it's a bit of a combination, but we'll cover that off. Thirdly, we are going to talk about your backup plan. What happens if you cannot sell your property and what you need to do and what you need to think about. And the fourth, well, you're just going to have to stick around and find out what the fourth is. But this is my most important point of all 4. So you definitely want to stick around to the end of the video to check out what I'm going to talk about then. So let's kick off with point number 1 then, which is how are you going to fund your flip? What types of funding are you going to use? Now, let's keep this really simple, okay? There are 2 ways of funding a flip: cash or bridging, okay? So there's 2 different types. Now, on the cash side, we can split this up. This could be your cash or it could be someone else's cash. On the bridging side, let's split that up. Are we looking at standard bridging, or are we looking at something a bit more creative? Maybe something like an open market value bridge, maybe something like development finance. What are we going to use? So 2 different things that we need to cover off here: cash and bridging. Obviously, as a broker, really it's the bridging side that I deal with a lot, but a lot of my clients will also deal in cash. Now, before we start on this, a lot of people will say, well, I don't want to use up all of my cash to purchase a property with, or I don't want to use up all of my investors' cash to buy a property with and have everything and not have anything left in the tank in case there's another opportunity. Well, here's a little secret for you. If you buy cash, you can always bridge later if another opportunity arises that you want to raise finance for. You buy property A cash for 100K, another property comes along that you need some more funds for, you can raise maybe 75% of that amount as a bridge relatively quickly. The legals are going to be quick because you already own the property to pull cash out to move it on to the next project. The project starts to overrun a little bit and you need to pay your investor back. Well, guess what? You can still raise a bridge on this property. So I don't necessarily move away from cash purchases for my clients if it's going to be the best thing for them. We can always bridge later on down the line, and I'm actually doing something exactly like that today with one of my clients. So firstly, we're looking at cash, your own cash or investors' cash. Let's make a decision on which one's going to be best to use there. The other is obviously bridging. And as I said before, there's various different ways that we can raise bridging. A standard bridge will work very similar to how a mortgage would work insofar as we are looking at getting 75% of the value of the property by way of a bridging loan. But if you need to plug the gap and you don't have as much cash or investor cash to put in and you need to look at different ways of doing that, we can look at some creative ways of helping you raise a little bit more with a bridge. So the first of those might be an open market value bridge. And what that means is you're actually, instead of getting a loan to value, based on the purchase price, you're getting a loan to value based on the actual open market value. If this is going to be more, then obviously this is going to be beneficial to you. And some lenders will actually lend you up to 100% of the purchase price if the open market value suggests that they can do so. So that's one way of doing it. Another way is that we look at something called an exchange with delayed completion. And what this means is you can exchange on the purchase of a property, we can get the funding lined up, you can go and do the work on the property that's needed, and then what we can do is we can actually complete on the finance with completion based on a valuation at that point. So you've already done the work, you've added the value, and we can then get a mortgage based on the value then, which could cover again up to 100% of the purchase price. Obviously, you've got to cover the cost of the works with that. Maybe you might find an investor that can help you with that. But then, of course, you can get the property straight on the market to sell, and that's going to work really, really well for you. The other method would be something along the lines of development finance, where you would not only borrow the money to purchase the property with, but you'd also borrow a tranche of funding or a facility of funding to cover the development costs. So they're the different types of funding that we're going to be looking at when it comes to flipping properties. Now, moving on to point number 2, which is which of these options is going to work best for you. Now, before we get into this, you've kind of got to ask yourself a few different questions. Some are pretty obvious, like, do you actually know any investors? Do you have access to people that could actually lend you potentially hundreds of thousands of pounds for this flip project? I was very fortunate. When I did my first flip project, we have a really good family friend who was able to lend us £250,000. I count myself very fortunate to have been in that position, but you guys watching, you might not be in that position. So you've got to ask yourself that question first. Who do you know, if anyone, that might be in a position to actually lend you the cash? If you don't have anyone, then maybe what you need to do is either start marketing yourself a little bit better or getting yourself out there a little bit more, or you might need to think, actually, that isn't an option for me right now. And that's okay, because let me let you into a little secret about investor finance. It's not always the cheapest option. A lot of people that I help with bridging are under the impression that it's cheaper to borrow money from somebody else than it is from a bridging lender. That is not necessarily true. A lot of the time with investor funds, you have a fixed rate of return. So for example, you might want to borrow 100,000 and you have a fixed rate of 10%, which means that whenever you come to pay that money back, you have to pay them 10% back. Now, with a bridging loan, even if your annualized rate is say 12, 13%, if you only use that bridge for say, I don't know, 3, 6 months, something like that, you're only going to pay back that bridging lender, the amount of money that to cover the number of months you've actually used it for. So you're paying back your initial sum anyway, but then you're only paying back the interest on what you're actually borrowing. So say your rate was 12% and you paid it back in 6 months. Effectively, your annualized rate on that is 6%. Which obviously is a lot lower than you paying your investor. And on top of that, even if you add in the fees that you're going to be paying a bridging loan, say 2%, that's still only 8%. You're 2% better off, guys. So don't think that investor finance is the be all and end all. So if you don't know any investors, don't get too wound up about that. There's still plenty of options on the table. Now, as we spoke about before, the other question to ask yourself is, do you actually have any cash available to you? Now, a lot of people that I come across are a little bit cash strapped in terms of either they're relatively new or they have other projects on the go, so that their money's tied up in those kind of projects. So ask yourself that, do you actually have cash available to you? Now, if you've got other properties in the background that you've done work on, you might have equity in these properties. So actually, you might be able to get cash out of those properties by way of a bridge or a refinance or something like that. So that's also something to bear in mind when it comes to thinking about what actually is available to you, what types of finance, or how are you going to fund these flips. Don't just think of it in kind of transactional and kind of linear. Okay. Think outside the box. What other assets have you got that you could use to actually get this project off the ground? It might be, okay, you don't have any investors, but what if a family member has a property with a ton of equity in them? Why not get them in on the deal? Get them as part of the of your project. Get them as a member of your new SPV, your new limited company that you're going to use to purchase and do this project with, and get them to raise some funds on their property. Make use of that. This is key ideas of thinking outside the box to help yourself grow. Okay, so firstly, do you know any investors? Secondly, do you have any cash? If the answer to both of those is no, then we need to be really creative with our finance, and then we have to look down the route of bridging, and we have to look at maybe some of the more creative types of bridging that we were discussing before, the open market value, the exchange with delayed completion, working with lenders that can be a little bit more flexible when it comes to these sorts of things. So they're the key questions that you would need to ask yourself in terms of what is available to me. And as I said before, don't always think that getting investors is the best and easiest and cheapest way of doing things. Often a culmination of various different options, like a bit of your own cash, a bit of investor cash and some bridging, could be the ultimate perfect scenario for you in terms of funding your flip project. Okay, this next one, guys, is so key. Number 3 in my list of things that you need to know or need to think about when it comes to your property flips, and particularly funding your property flips, is what is your backup? What happens if, pardon my French, the shit hits the fan, okay? Now, there are so many things that could go wrong with your flip project. The market could dip, your builders could get ill or contract COVID or something like that, and suddenly everyone's off site. There could be a huge amount of issues that could occur. I mean, with my first development, we spent 2 days digging out the foundations of our extension in the middle of a blinding hot summer, and then suddenly we had a massive flash flood for 3 days, completely out of season, and all of our work got completely undone because the back garden flooded, and our trenches that we dug were completely full of water. So this took us back about 2 or 3 weeks in the end, because we had to wait for it to dry out and all that sort of stuff. So sometimes you just cannot envisage some of these problems occurring. So you have to have a backup plan. Can you refinance this property if needed to pay back your debtors, or if indeed to pay back yourself? You know, you might be putting all of your cash into this deal, and if you struggle to sell it, you may be missing out on tons of other opportunities that are coming your way because you don't have that cash readily available to you. So having a plan B in terms of your exit strategy is really, really important. And in terms, when we talk about exit strategies, particularly as a broker, we're talking about, are we exiting by sale? That's plan A here because we're flipping the property, or do we refinance? Now, remember, whatever your property is going to be valued on the back end at, we can borrow 75% or up to 75% of that on a buy-to-let mortgage. There are lenders out there that can lend you 80 to 85%, but I will try and steer clear of those if you possibly can, because you don't want to over leverage yourself. And as your portfolio grows, lenders have to do background stress tests on your portfolio, and anything really above 75% is going to start causing you a few issues. So you want to limit it to 75%. So what I mean by this is, when you're working out your backup plan, could you actually move forward from this project by only releasing 75% of the value? We call this this value the GDV, the gross development value, the value at the end of the project. Now, this is something that you should be working out at the very, very beginning. If you cannot exit this deal by borrowing 75% of the end value of the GDV, then you have to question how you're going to potentially make up this difference. Have you got other projects on the go at the same time that are going to yield you some cash? Do you have any other business interests in the background that are making you monthly cash flow that you can put into this deal and cover yourself? You know, think about all of these things before rushing into a deal. Think about your exit routes and always have a plan B. Can you even get a mortgage? This is so important. The amount of clients I speak to that have purchased properties cash and want to refinance at the end because they haven't been able to sell the property, and they're actually unmortgageable. They don't have any income to speak of or anything that's provable. You know, they've got a lot of adverse credit from, you know, some bad decisions they made with their credit many years ago. There are so many reasons that you might not be mortgageable. The property itself, although it might be an amazing property to sell on and make a great profit, will it actually yield you a good enough income from a monthly rental to support a lender's rental calculator to give you the amount of money that you actually want to borrow? These are all the questions that you need to be asking yourself before you even go ahead with this project. Okay, and now we're on to our fourth and final piece of the puzzle. And I said that this was going to be the most important thing that you guys need to understand about funding your flip project. And that is, you need to begin with the end in mind. We touched upon it a little bit in point number 3, but I have so many clients that put so much effort into their due diligence and workings out of the beginning of the deal, the purchase. And I understand that, the buzz phrase is you make your money when you purchase. Yes, you do. But guess when your money gets into your back pocket? It's when you sell. You need to begin with the end in mind, and you need to really do your due diligence on what the end value of your property is going to be. What is the GDV going to be? Now, don't massage this. Don't get ahead of yourself. Don't think everything will be okay. You've got to work with contingencies here. We see down valuations. I say down valuations. We see that surveyors going out and valuing properties when it comes to refinancing all the time, where the value comes in much lower than what our clients anticipate. And the reason for this is not because the surveyor's had a bad day, it's because the client has not done their due diligence on what the genuine end value is going to be. A lot of these reports come back with sales comparables, which are genuine sales comparables. They are showing in the true light of day that the property that you thought was worth £500,000 is only worth 400, and there is no way around that. We actually had a case recently where we were speaking to a client who needed to refinance a property that they purchased cash, and they truly believed, and they worked out their figures on the fact that this property was worth 550, I think it was. Yeah, was it 550? Yeah, £550,000. They got a evaluation done, and guess what? It came in at £450, £100,000 below what they thought the property was going to be worth. And when I checked out their valuation report that they had received, they were lucky to get 450. That broke the ceiling price of the road. Okay, you need to be looking into these sorts of things. What properties that are going to be similar to yours on the back end have sold within the last 6 months, within the first 4 to 5 digits of the postcode or quarter of a mile, half mile surrounding area? And what is the rough estimate of the pound per square foot value of local similar properties? If you're buying a 3-bedroom terrace, and it's going to be a 3-bedroom terrace, what's the price per square foot within the local area of a 3-bedroom terrace? And use this and create a very, let's say, watertight pack of information so you can feel completely compelled that you are actually going to be able to sell this property for what it's worth. And on top of that, it's not just about what it's worth. It's actually, when it comes to flipping, it's how long is it going to take you? Because let's be honest, let's say out of those first, in point number 1, the types of finance that you're going to be raising. Let's talk about the cash, let's talk about the investors, and let's talk about the bridging, okay? They're on a time limit. You cannot afford to go over those limits because, number 1, if you go over your limit when it comes to an investor, you're going to lose credibility. Chances are they're not going to want to invest again. If you go over the limit when it comes to bridging finance, you are going to be hit with huge fee interest and other fees on top of that, that is going to potentially cripple your deal. And it also looks pretty bad on your record as well in terms of getting future finance in place. So you don't want to be going over the term that you've set out in terms of financing this deal. And so understanding how long it's going to take for you to sell these properties is going to be so important. Speak to your agents. Find an agent early doors that you think is going to be the agent you're going to use to sell, and really get them to show you how they're going to market the property. Are they going to start marketing it before it's finished to try and get some early sales in, generate some interest? Or can they go in with an open house or something like that and get the property sold quickly? How long is it taking them to sell similar properties like yours? If it's 6 or 7 or 8 months, you've got to work that into your overall time frame. And if you're putting all your own cash into that, is that really a period of time that you want to be sitting on cash that you could be using on other projects? As I said though, we could always jump in and stick a bridge on there to release cash early. We call those development exit loans if we can, or if you need. But ultimately, you want to be working out all these things at the beginning. So that for me is the most important thing that you guys need to be thinking about when looking at your flip projects, and particularly when funding your flip projects, is begin with the end in mind. Work out your gross development value. So there we go, guys. 4 things that you need to think about when it comes to funding your flip projects. Firstly, what type of funding is available. Are we looking at cash? Are we looking at bridging? Secondly, we need to look at what types are available for you. Do you know any investors? Have you got the cash? Otherwise, are you limited just to bridging? And what kind of bridging are you going to need to go for? Depends on your circumstances. 3 is have a backup plan. Can you refinance this property, and can the money you raise be enough to cover off any debt that you've got on the property or pay off an investor? And 4, as I said, the most important, start with the end in mind. Actually do some proper due diligence into what your GDV is going to be. Otherwise, you're probably going to be massively disappointed. So there you have it, guys. 4 things that you need to understand about funding your next flip project. I really hope that this has been massively important and helpful to you. If it has, do me a massive favor and share it with as many people as you possibly can by clicking the share button below. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. And also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. But for now, I hope this has been helpful, and I will catch you on the next video. Cheers, guys.